Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my final updated draft video of pre-season. The next team selection video that I do after this will be my final team selection video ahead of game week 1. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel or if you're new, please do consider subscribing, but without further ado, let's jump into it. So jumping straight into the draft, wasting absolutely no time at all today. There have been quite a few changes since the previous draft, but with this current draft that I'm about to show you today, I haven't made any changes in 3 days. Now, that might not sound like a lot to a normal person, but of course, because I'm a content creator and because I love the game, I'm constantly tinkering. I'm always looking on Twitter, I'm looking at data, I'm looking at pre-season, and I'm making changes non-stop. So for me to be on a draft for 3 days and make absolutely no changes, that is quite a lot, and it does mean that I am probably quite close to what I'm likely to end up with in game week 1. Of course, the Community Shield will be an absolutely massive game to get some information, and other pre-season games we might get a little bit more too. And of course, any press conferences before game week 1 might change our opinion, and potentially some early team news around City may change our teams too. So we'll have to take into account all of that. But I am very, very settled with my current draft. A few interesting things to note before we even look at the players. I am in a 3-4-3, which I genuinely did not believe I would even consider. Maybe 2 weeks ago, I would have said you'd be absolutely crazy to go into the season with a 3-4-3. But the more I think about it, the more I actually like the forward options. And I think that there are going to be quite a few that emerge around game week 2, game week 3, game week 4. And being in a 3-4-3 allows you to still have 4 really strong midfielders, but also have some options to pivot in the attack. And I think a lot of people that are on either a 3-5-2 with one really cheap striker, such as a João Pedro, or a 4-5-1, may struggle to make that pivot. So I do really like the 3-4-3 at the moment. Let me know down below in the comments what current formation do you have in your latest draft. And the other thing to note before we look at the players is I do have 0.5 million in the bank. Now, most of my recent drafts have had some kind of money in the bank. I'm not necessarily deliberately doing that. I'm not holding off on players that I desperately want in my team just to have money in the bank. But if I have 0.5 in the bank, for example, as you can see by my bench, I've got Bulldog. Yes, someone like a Pau Torres or a Rico Henry is probably a better option than Bulldog. But do I need to? Considering I've already got 4 good defenders, Bulldog looks like he will start the season too. Do I need to spend that extra 0.5? Probably not. So I'm trying to think about if I don't need the money, keep it, because it is always useful. I've said this in multiple videos in pre-season. Having money in the bank is a really, really useful thing over the first few game weeks. With all that being said, today's draft is rated at 96% by Fantasy Football Hub, and it's predicted to get 66.9 points. If you would like to get your team rated for free, the first link in the description, absolutely free. You don't even need to sign up. You can just get your team rated there. If you do want to sign up and you want to access some of the further features over at Fantasy Football Hub, there is currently 50% off. For as little as £3 per month, you can get access to pretty much everything on the site. So do check out those 2 links in the description. Let's move on to the team. So in goal, I have made a change. As you would have seen by most of my recent drafts, I did have Johnston in there. I've actually made the switch to Onana, which does mean Luke Shaw dropping out. I do probably think Luke Shaw is just about worth the extra 0.5 on top of Onana. The reason I've got Onana in goal is I'm not 100% set on any of the other goalkeepers. I do still really like Johnston, but we don't know that he's definitely first choice. We think he is. And also, Palace's data might have been slightly inflated towards the back end of last season, just due to the really favourable fixture run that they had. They've also got a few departures. They've got a few injuries too. So I'm maybe less hot on Crystal Palace than I was a few weeks ago. But if I am not on Onana, it will be Johnston. So for me, they are the 2 keepers that I'm going back and forth between. If I have Onana, it means I don't have Luke Shaw. If I have Johnston, I'll almost definitely have Luke Shaw. So for me, I will be covering the Manchester United defence. I do think Onana will do very well at Manchester United. I don't think he'll necessarily get that many more FPL points than David De Gea. I think we'll defensively be slightly better this season, and maybe he'll be slightly better for bonus points just due to the amount of accurate passes that he makes. But I don't think that Onana's suddenly going to score like 60, 70 points more than a De Gea would. I think they'll probably end on around the same amount of points, and I think he will be a valid option for £5 million. So at the moment, Onana is my goalkeeper. At the moment, the back 3 in my starting 11 has remained unchanged for about 5 or 6 days now, and I really like it. Estepinian and Gabriel have been pretty much all of my drafts. Brighton and Arsenal have some really strong fixtures over the opening few, and they're 2 really, really solid defences. I think Brighton in particular may be going slightly under the radar from a defensive perspective. Yes, they've got lots of really good attacking options, but they were also a really strong defense last season too. So I don't even mind like an Estepinian and still double up, or Verbruggen if he looks like he'll be first choice. I don't mind the double up on the Brighton defense, purely just because there is so much uncertainty in the Brighton attack that maybe we won't want any Brighton attackers or many of them over the opening few weeks. So really like Estepinian. Gabriel is just a way to cover the Arsenal defence. I definitely think the triple Arsenal attack is a feasible option to start the season. Martinelli, Jesus, Saka. I absolutely love that. I've had that in a few drafts myself. But when I think about it, there are so many good attackers to choose from, and I think less good defenders. And I do really want to cover that Arsenal defence, because if they do keep 2 or 3 clean sheets and they're opening 4 or 5 fixtures, that is going to be a real rank killer if you don't own them. And especially if maybe the attacker that you do have isn't the correct one. I think you're taking quite a big gamble there going for 3 attackers. And I think it's nice to have 2 attackers and then cover the Arsenal defence with one of their defenders. I do think Zinchenko could be a decent option, but I just don't think he's as nailed as Gabriel. They could play, for example, I don't know, Tierney and Timber, Tierney and White. They've got a few different options in who they can play, so I don't think that I'm going to be ending up on anyone other than Gabriel. The third defender in the starting 11 is John Stones, which is a new inclusion from the previous draft that I showed you. The more I think about it, the more I want a Man City defender. Over the last few seasons, they have comfortably been, every single season, the best defence in the league. Their expected goals conceded is exceptionally good. I think they were really, really unlucky last season not to keep more clean sheets. I know Ederson is a bit stinky at points and he makes mistakes, but there were also some ridiculous wonder goals scored against them. It was something like in 9 or 10 of the games where they only conceded 1 goal, they conceded less than 0.5 XGC, which is expected goals conceded, which basically means on a lot of occasions they were potentially quite unlucky not to keep more clean sheets. Basically, in my opinion, if you trust the expected goals conceded data, you tend to get more clean sheets from that team. And I think that Man City are a team that will keep a lot of clean sheets at the start of the season. And I just think that John Stones is the most nailed City defender, maybe alongside Ruben Dias. But I think that Stones has a combination of everything. He's fairly nailed. He's probably the only one that can really play that inverted role the way that Pep wants, or at least at the level that Pep wants. And he's also got slightly higher assist threat since going into the midfield, just because he's higher up the pitch. And he's also not bad from corners too. So the more I look at John Stones, the more I like him as a pick. And I just want another Man City player in my team. I'm fed up of just having Haaland in my team. They're the best team in the league. They've got the best fixtures in the league. And every week, just having Haaland feels a little bit underwhelming. So at the moment, John Stones has made his way into my latest draft. And he stayed there, like I said, for the last 5 or 6 days. Ben Chilwell is the 4th defender. At the moment, he's on my bench, but most weeks he will probably be in my starting 11. I love what we are seeing from Ben Chilwell in pre-season. He's playing such an attacking role. He's on set pieces. He got an assist in a recent pre-season game. Thiago Silva scoring the header. He took a brilliant shot and almost scored. He just looks exactly what you want from a defender in FPL. I say only 5.5. If he can stay fit, I do think that will be a bargain this season. From game week 3 onwards, Chelsea's fixtures are absolutely exceptional. And that's around the time, for Estepinian, it's game week 4, that Estepinian's fixtures start to drop off. So around game week 3, game week 4, we'll make the switch where Estepinian a lot of weeks will maybe drop to the bench. Chilwell comes into the starting 11. And maybe I'll also rotate Estepinian and Gabriel for the slightly trickier fixtures for Arsenal. So I really like that very strong 4 defenders in my team. And I feel like at all points, you've got a really, really strong back 3, despite the fixtures maybe changing. And then the 5th defender is Baldock. I think at the moment, he's probably my favourite £4 million defender, but there are more emerging. There are more signings happening every single day. So we'll have to wait and see. That is one of those decisions that I'll make absolutely last minute, which £4 million defender I want. And as I said, I do have 0.5 million in the bank. So if I'm fancying a Pau Torres or a Rico Henry and I want to use that money, I absolutely can. But for me at the moment, I think having those 4 defenders as strong as they are, I don't really need to spend any extra money on the 5th defender. So that is the defence. I'm super happy with it. Let's move on to the 4-man midfield. So moving on to the 4-man midfield, and this is probably the area where I'm least happy with this team because I only have 4 of them and there are probably about 8 or 9 midfielders I want. And of course, this is the issue with a 3-4-3 over a 3-5-2, in that even when you have 5 midfielders, you're still lacking key players that you probably want in your team. So I fully acknowledge that is a limitation of going for a 3-4-3, but it does mean that I also get an extra forward, which I like, and we'll discuss the forwards in a second. I'm actually going to start with the players that are missing that I do really want in my team before discussing the 4 that I've got. I do really still want a Brighton attacker of some kind, whether that be a forward or a midfielder. They do have some of the best fixtures over the opening 3. From game week 4 onwards, they do really start to dip, but game week 1 against Luton at home, it feels horrible not having a Brighton attacker in my team, especially someone like a Matoma who's going to be very highly owned. Even a João Pedro looks like he could be a good option. So I definitely am missing a Brighton attacker here. I guess my issue with Brighton at the moment is I don't know who's going to start. We've seen Solly March miss out in pre-season. We've seen Matoma looks like he is the most nailed, but again, we just don't know 100%. I would expect him to start. Enciso's missed out at points. João Pedro's played quite a few minutes, but we don't know if he's fully nailed. Ferguson doesn't seem to be starting in pre-season. Welbeck looks like he could be an option, but will they start Welbeck or Ferguson? It's very difficult to try and predict what's going to happen with that Brighton attack. They just have so many options to choose from. If I was to predict, I do think, assuming everyone's fit, it will be March, Matoma, João Pedro, and one of Ferguson or Welbeck. I would predict Ferguson, assuming he's fully fit to play. But I don't know that for certain. And especially over the first three, we're not just looking at game week 1 against Luton. It just feels like Brighton could be the new Man City, where it's so difficult to predict who's going to play, especially when you take into account European competitions after a certain amount of game weeks. So for me, at the moment, I just can't get a Brighton attacker in. The other player that I'm missing in this draft that I desperately want in my team is Phil Foden. He's been in pretty much all of my drafts. At the moment, I've sacrificed Phil Foden to get an extra forward into my team. And I'll discuss that forward in a second, but it's basically an extra forward versus Phil Foden. At the moment, I'm just about leaning towards the forward that I really like in my team. And then the other player that I would really like in my team is Bruno Fernandes. I'm just struggling. I could put Bruno Fernandes in instead of Martinelli, but then I would have to find some extra money to get Gabriel Jesus in the forward spot because I want triple Arsenal. I could go for Bruno Fernandes instead of Rashford, but I just really do think Rashford's got greater goal threat, which is obviously better in FPL, and I'm not going to put him in instead of Saka. The only thing that makes me think that Bruno could still be worth it instead of Rashford is the new rule that's coming in for the Premier League with respect to extra minutes. We saw it in the World Cup. It looks like it'll be the case in the Premier League, where we're going to see maybe 9, 10, 11, 12 minutes of extra time in the Premier League. So players that stay on the pitch and don't ever come off are going to be absolutely invaluable in FPL. I'm looking at the likes of Bruno Fernandes and Salah, especially as they're both on penalties as well. If they're essentially getting an extra 10 minutes of football, it is quite a lot of time. And like we said in the past, there are a lot of last-minute penalties conceded. There are a lot of last-minute chances too. So staying on the pitch to the end of the match is a massive advantage. And I do feel like Bruno and Salah are two players that will really benefit, like I said, especially because they're both on penalties. So those are the three players that I feel like I'm missing. Well, Brighton attacker, Bruno Fernandes, and Phil Foden. But I do really like the midfield four that I've got. I do have a double Arsenal midfield at the moment of Saka and Martinelli. We've spoken about Saka to death. I think he's really good for expected minutes. He's on penalties, some free kicks and corners, and he's also got pretty good data too. And he's also exceptionally good at home, and Arsenal have some really good home fixtures to start the season. Martinelli versus Jesus is a very tricky one for me. I think if Martinelli gets a similar amount of minutes to Jesus, I prefer Martinelli. But I feel like Gabriel Jesus is slightly more nailed, and his data is also stronger. And if you are a data-driven manager, which I guess I am, it's difficult to ignore the data for Gabriel Jesus, but he's just such a poor finisher. Whereas I think Martinelli is an exceptionally strong finisher. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to also see what Trossard does, because Trossard has been really good in pre-season, but he's playing more so that kind of number 8 role. If he continues to play that means even less competition for Martinelli. But if all of a sudden Havertz comes into that number 8, Ødegaard plays on the other side, and Trossard is rotating with Martinelli, then of course that makes Martinelli more of a rotation risk. So we'll have to see what happens in the final few pre-season games. But for me, at the moment, Martinelli and Saka feel like two really, really good options. And having no Jesus allows me to get 2 extra forwards in my team, which I do really like. Like I said, I think Marcus Rashford, the reason for him over Bruno Fernandes is just the slightly higher goal threat. But I think both Rashford and Fernandes are 2 great options. And in a lot of my drafts, I would say over half of my drafts, I've had both Rashford and Fernandes. And I think that is absolutely fine. I know the fixtures aren't great. I know Manchester United don't score a ton of goals, but I don't mind that double up there. And then the final of the 4 midfielders in the starting 11 is Brian Mbeumo. I'll be honest, I've watched a little bit of Brentford. I've watched some of the extended highlights on YouTube. I haven't watched any full games, I should acknowledge. I've not been overwhelmed by Mbeumo from open play. I don't think he's looked that amazing. I actually think it's Wissa who has looked like the best Brentford asset. The reason I do like Mbeumo, though, is his data is consistently very good. Over the last 2 seasons, he's had very strong expected data. He is on penalties as well. He took a penalty in pre-season when most other players were on the pitch, and he should be on a couple of corners too, and maybe a few other set pieces. He should be slightly more talismanic in the absence of Tony, and I just think he is a very safe option in that midfield, because there are other good £6.5 million midfielders should you want to move Mbeumo on. So I do really like him, but I haven't been overwhelmed from what I've seen from, I guess, the eye test in pre-season. But we'll have to see how that goes. I do think Wissa is an excellent option. He's not in my current team, but I do really, really like him. I guess I could quite easily, I said there was a slight concern that I don't have a Brighton attacker in my team. I could quite easily just go for Matoma instead of Mbeumo. The reason for Mbeumo is I think that Longer term, the fixtures are better for Brentford. Over the opening 4 game weeks, if you take into account the fourth fixture too, I would say that Mbeumo has equally good fixtures to Matoma. And I just like the addition of penalties. I'm such a sucker for a penalty taker, which is why I really don't like having no Bruno in my team. I just think it's such an advantage to have penalties. So Mbeumo is in the team. I should just note on penalties, Eze could be a good option at 6.52. I'm just a little bit unsure. As I said with Johnston, a few things up in the air with Palace at the moment, and I don't necessarily love their opening fixture. So that's midfield 4. Just a note on the £4.5 million midfielders. I still don't know who the best one is. At the moment, I've got Nakamba, who is actually at Luton. Ignore the Aston Villa kit. He could be a good option. Looks like he'll be fairly nailed, but if a better £4.5 million midfielder arises, I will end up switching to them. I don't love the fact that I've got a £4.5 million midfielder when there are so many good midfielders to choose from, but that's the sacrifice you make to go for a 3-4-3. Let's take a look at the 3 forwards. So guys, I just wanted to show you the new My Team feature over at Fantasy Football Hub. As I said at the start of the video, you can get your team rated for free now or get 50% off if you want to sign up for more of the premium benefits. In my opinion, it is definitely worth it. It's a site I've been using myself for over a year now. I use it on a daily basis. I absolutely love it. And I just wanted to show you, like I said, the new My Team feature. It's absolutely slick. You've got all of the points projections there. You can see your bench there. You can actually click Optimize. There's a button at the bottom which optimizes your team as well based on projected points. You can also just click to the side and view your team for future game weeks as well, which is a massive advantage because I feel like not enough people in FPL plan ahead and look at what their team looks like for future game weeks. One of the reasons that I love doing this for my team is because I've got Chilwell and Nkunku, who's a bit of a spoiler for the forward line, in place already. And Chelsea have that really nice fixture swing in game week 3. You can see for game week 3, I actually have a 99% team rating. So I just wanted to say, like I said, get your team rated for free using the first link in the description, or get 50% off using my link in the description if you want to sign up to some of the premium benefits. So back to the team. You saw a little spoiler there. The front 3 is Haaland, Nkunku, and Darwin Nunez. Now, I'm going to start with Haaland. Don't need to talk about him. He's absolutely brilliant. He will be my captain in game week 1. Unless there is something that happens in the next couple of weeks, which I can't see happening, everyone's going to own him. Everyone's going to captain him. It is a shame that it is pretty much picking 14 players and you just lose 14 million. I don't think there's much benefit to going without him. Of course, if he has a slow start and you have no Haaland, you're laughing. I think there's more chance of a pig flying, to be honest, than Haaland having a slow start to the season, especially when you look at the fixtures that City have. So for me, Haaland is a non-negotiable. I'm not going to go without him. People are asking for a no Haaland draft. I won't be doing it on this channel because I just don't think it's worth it for me. The other 2 strikers, potentially slightly surprising, and there are more that I actually want in my team. We'll start with Nkunku because I feel like Nkunku versus Jackson is a really, really tricky one at the moment. I would argue from what I've seen in pre-season, Jackson might be a slightly better option if they play a similar amount of minutes. My reason for having Nkunku is I feel like Nkunku will play slightly more minutes. If I had to predict, I would say he's slightly more nailed. Let me know down below, Chelsea fans, if you think I disagree. But he's also on penalties as well. And I don't want to annoy you guys watching this by keep on going on about penalties. It's such a massive advantage. If you have a player in your team and you keep them for the majority of the season and they get an extra 4 or 5 goals through penalties, that can be massive. And if you have 4 or 5 penalty takers in your team, that could be as many as kind of 12 or 15 extra goals through penalties in a season. I wouldn't necessarily pick a player just because they're a penalty taker. I wouldn't go out and pick a CDM just because they're on penalties. But when you're saying Nkunku versus Darwin is such a close call, maybe you just go for the penalty taker. I know Nkunku is slightly more expensive, but I think he's got better minutes on penalties, and I just like the look of him as well. A bit of an eye test thing. I just fancy him to do fairly well for Chelsea. The more I think about it, the more I do want to start with one of Jackson and Nkunku. So if in the final preseason games and the press conferences just before game week 1, Jackson looks fully nailed and I want to go there, I may well do that. I can't see myself at the moment, at least, completely removing a Chelsea attacker. I think they've looked very good in preseason. I know it's only been a couple of games, and I know it's not always the strongest opposition, but I just think that under Pochettino, they will attack fairly well, and I want one of them in my team. So at the moment, that is Nkunku. I know it's not the easiest game to open against Liverpool at home. I still think that Chelsea could grab a goal or 2, though. And then the 11th player in the starting 11 and my 3rd forward, I know a lot of people won't like this, it is Darwin. I think that the number 9 going to Darwin turned my head slightly. And I know these things shouldn't necessarily impact us too much because we should be looking at data and eye test and touch maps and stuff like that. But it does play a part. And Darwin getting the number 9 made a few of us think, is he going to be the starting striker this season? In pre-season, he has looked really good. He has been, in my opinion, Liverpool's best attacker. I think Diogo Jota has been exceptionally strong too. If you want to go for Jota, I have no issues with that. But I just think that Darwin at the moment looks like he'll be the most nailed forward option alongside alongside Salah. I thought it would be Gakpo, but at the moment, Darwin looks to be the favoured option, and he's playing much, much better than Gakpo in pre-season. We spoke about in previous videos, Darwin's data is just much, much stronger than Gakpo's as well. So if we're looking at data, we're going for Darwin. If we're looking at expected minutes, at the moment, in my opinion, we're looking at Darwin too. And if we're looking at kind of ceiling and improvement and who we think will improve year upon year, I think Darwin does have a big season ahead of him. I could conceivably see Darwin scoring 20 plus Premier League goals this season quite easily. I think if he gets enough minutes and he can stay fit, I do think he has that in his locker. And I think we'll see him improve in his finishing this season as well. I just feel like he's got a massively high upside and I want Darwin in my team, at the moment at least. As I said, I did have Foden in my team until quite recently. And that was the only change I'd made about 3 or 4 days ago. I had a 3-5-2, exactly the same as it is here. But I had Phil Foden in the midfield, a 3-5-2, and I had a £4.5 million forward instead. I've simply, because they're the same price, basically just switched Darwin and Foden. I would love to know down below, do you prefer Foden, do you prefer Darwin? Most people will probably prefer neither. I just feel like Darwin's got the slightly higher ceiling just due to the role that he plays for Liverpool. And the data that we've seen last season was just so, so strong. The reason I like this team, and the reason I think it's an improvement on my previous teams as well, I like the fact that there's an additional City option in John Stones. And a lot of my teams, I might have had a Foden, but if I don't, I'm looking at just Haaland. And I like the idea of getting a City defender in there. The other reason I like this team is I feel like I did have a lack of Liverpool. I couldn't really work out a way for me, without sacrificing the rest of the team, to get Trent or Salah in. And I tried. I really did try. And I've built drafts with both, and I don't necessarily hate them. I just feel like I'm sacrificing too much and I'm losing out other key players that I want. But simply switching Foden to Darwin still allows me a piece of that Liverpool attacking pie. I still get an option that I do think has a high ceiling and can score goals. But I'm not sacrificing the rest of the team too much. I'm simply losing one differential option in Foden for a slightly other differential option in Darwin Nunez. So at the moment, I do really like this 3-4-3. I think it ticks literally every box I can think of, apart from having that fifth midfielder. I've got City coverage in defence. I've got other coverage from some of the other top teams. I've got Chilwell on the bench as well. I've got Nkunku too. So I've got 2 Chelsea players to cover that game week 3 fixture swing. I've got 4 strong midfielders too. I've got the likes of Mbeumo, Saka, Nkunku and Haaland who are on penalties. I don't really see a massive place that this team is lacking, apart from, once again, the fact that I am missing a 5th midfielder. I will just note, if Harry Kane does go to Bayern, there's a very strong chance that I probably just drop Darwin and go to Richarlison in midfield and it's a 3-5-2. The other option that I've got, because I have 0.5 in the bank, is keeping this exact team here and just doing Mbeumo to Richarlison. So I will acknowledge that it would massively change if Kane does leave. We'll all probably want Richarlison in our team. Will that make Heung-min Son a slightly better option because there's a good chance he'll be on penalties? Maybe so. We'll have to discuss all of that. But for now, as things stand, before the Community Shield, before any of the other upcoming pre-season games, I am extremely happy with this team and I don't see a massive place that it's lacking. Please do let me know down below in the comments what you think of this team, if there are any things you could improve, and whether you agree with Fantasy Football Hub. Is it a 96% rated team? So guys, there you have it. That is my current draft ahead of the Game Week 1 deadline. There is just over a week now till the deadline. So this will be my final update before my final Game Week 1 team selection video, just before the Game Week 1 deadline. If you're enjoying the content here on this channel and you want to see more content over pre-season and going into the season 2, I would really appreciate you subscribing. We are on the road to 80,000 subscribers, which fingers crossed we will hit before the Game Week 1 deadline. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.